What's up, everybody? Welcome back into our episode of The Lawyer You Know. I'm excited to still talk about the Karen Read verdict, the interviews, the fallout. What's next? What do we expect to continue to come out as jurors and lawyers and witnesses and cops are giving interviews? And I am going to get Andrea Burkhart's take. She streamed the entire trial. She also has a lot of experience with criminal appeals. And what are some of the issues that may have popped up in this case if we would have seen it go the other way, or potentially will they appeal the OUI charge? It's a question a lot of people ask me. I know what I think. Let's figure out what she thinks. Let's get to it now. Andrea, you get a break.
Peter.
It's over. It's over for now until the next one starts. You don't have to stream hours and hours and hours every day until the next one, right? It's kind of like coming out of a trial. It's like, it's over until the next one. And you've got ones coming up. But how does it feel now, knowing the verdict and Karen Read, kind of knowing how you saw this case throughout? What were your thoughts and feelings when you heard the verdict?
Just relief to have the closure, and I just think about it. My perspective, of course, is just a tiny percentage of what Karen is feeling, what the team is feeling, but just having that weight lifted of knowing one way or another, this thing is done. It's served its function of giving us some finality about this accusation. And we all get to go home now and just deal with the reckoning of what all of it means.
Yeah. And it's been nonstop pretty much since the verdict. I was going to say day, but maybe hour, maybe every 15 minutes, I get somebody else DMing me something that's being said, some quote by Michael Morrissey. The jury has spoken. The McCabe's and the Alberts are out speaking, Proctor speaking, Jackson's interview. I mean, there's just so much going on in the aftermath that it's probably really hard for Karen Read and the team to take a beat and really be in a celebratory mood or realize she has her life back. As we know, just because you get a not guilty verdict doesn't mean your life goes back to normal.
No.
There's a lot of people that still think she did it. This is going to be part of her life for the rest of her life. And it's just something that they're going to have to deal with. As you see all of the aftermath, and especially jurors speaking out, what are your thoughts about how kind of media is consumed and what we do in talking about these cases, and how it feels like more and more jurors speak out because of the high profile nature, and there's options for where they can speak out? How do you think that, do you like it? Do you not like it? And how do you think it's going to affect the justice system?
Well, I just think trial coverage has changed so dramatically in the last, 5 to 10 years. 10 years ago, you didn't have options to be able to consume a trial like this, to watch it with lawyers, get get feedback from lawyers about what's happening, get this kind of instantaneous feedback from the participants and stuff like that once things are over. Everything is filtered through the mainstream media lens, and for better or worse, the mainstream media lens has just always tended to be relatively uneducated on the system as a whole, the details of the criminal justice process, the laws and rules and so forth. And frankly, even some of the principles and philosophy behind why the system works the way that it does. So we've always been reliant on just kind of minimal information, taking a lot on faith as far as what's reliable and what's accurate and so forth. And so now with cameras everywhere, being able to watch it, being able to get the feedback from trial participants, people who have worked in courtrooms, worked in the system, and understand kind of what's going on a little bit better. I think it just makes for a lot more intelligent viewing and intelligent consumption. One of the things I've loved about streaming this trial is the folks who come into my chat. Peter, I have like crazy intelligent people who come in when we had like the ARCA witnesses on, and I've got engineers, I've got astrophysicists, I've got these people in my chat that like know everything. They like have already done this math problem in their heads before it even comes up on cross-examination. It's been a great experience for me because it's such a great melting pot of information. I learn new things about these technical issues that come up in the trial, and the folks who watch with me get to hopefully learn a little bit more about, why are they objecting like this, and why do you need to do things like that, and just the sort of nitty-gritty parts of conducting a trial. So I think it's just been really transformative in terms of how we are able to monitor the criminal justice system from, I think, a much more sophisticated perspective these days than even just 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think that truth is a real thing and reality is a real thing. And the way the mainstream media used to explain things wasn't always like that. Sometimes they had an angle or a reason why they would want to say something a certain way or spin something a certain way. But with cameras and with people saying what really happened,
Mhm.
I just find it hard to take that as a negative. Like
Yeah.
juror interviews, don't you think that's a problem, Peter, because of what you guys do? Now they're coming out and talking about this, it could create problems. Said, if they're coming out and telling me the truth of what happened in that room, it doesn't change what happened in that room. We just
Mhm.
know what happened in that room. I'm always
Mhm.
going to be of the mindset of I'd rather know. I'd rather
Yeah.
know than not know. And we just assume, yeah, all the juries are perfect. None of them look at social media. None of them talk about things they shouldn't. Like,
Mhm.
would rather just know what's going on in there. And I also, from a learning perspective, I want to know what they found important, what they liked and
Oh.
didn't. How did reasonable doubt come across to them? And that's the thing to me.
Mhm.
I want to get into some of the interviews here. We don't have to talk about any specifically if you don't want, or you can reference some, but a bunch of them have come out from alternates and
Mhm.
jurors graded. The
Mhm.
biggest for me is the first jury saw things as distractors and whatever because they were trying to prove a conspiracy theory, basically. The second jury, they've all talked so much about reasonable doubt, what they thought
Mhm.
it was. I think all the defense attorneys, and I think people like you and I were like, they got it. They understood what reasonable
Mhm.
doubt actually meant. And you see how it affects deliberation. That's something that I, as a trial attorney, learned. The way you define it and hammer on it and make it the focus of your entire trial can really
Mhm.
make a difference on how that jury looks at reasonable doubt. What did you think when you heard some of the interviews?
Oh, yeah, 1,000,000%. You always wanna hear from jurors. Anytime you get an opportunity to hear from jurors, you wanna hear from jurors because you're gonna learn so much from it, and I'm sure you have also had the experience many times. You talk to the jury after you get your verdict, and maybe the verdict is what you expected, maybe it's not, but you thought you had at least an idea of how different things in your case were going to land, and then you talk to the jury and you find out they're focused on something that it never would have even crossed your mind that this was going to be an issue back in the deliberation room. I
Mm,
had that moment when we were when we were on the verdict watch and we got that question about the 507 DUI time
yeah.
frame.
Mhm.
Could we be convicting her of DUI at 507? And here I am. Okay, Peter, this case is 3.5 years old. We've thought about every single angle over
Mhm.
and over again, and it's never crossed my mind we might actually have like a second act that could constitute a DUI. What is that? That means we could have a unanimity problem when it comes to what the verdict is actually convicting her of. Um, there's always a different perspective that the jury brings that you the attorney you can try your best, and that's really a big part of what your job is to predict how things are going to land with the jury, but you just don't know. So that feedback that you get is such a critical way of testing and checking your own perception and how calibrated am I with just how ordinary people are going to look at a case and think about it.
Yeah, I've had that happen so many times, and thank God most of it have been good results still, because if
Mhm.
not, I would not be able to like forgive myself for not thinking about some of this stuff. We had a case where client went to the hospital after a car accident with a brain injury and had a concussion and a spine and so we're explaining, we put those records in and we talk through, right? And we go to the trial and a juror reaches out to us and like, hey, I want to talk to you about it afterwards because I think you guys made a small mistake. I was able to explain it to the rest of the jurors, so it was fine. We're like, okay. They were like, there was, they list all the medications that you're taking at the hospitals,
Mhm.
nothing to do with the car accident, nothing to do with anything we talked about. She's like, we read through those and there's a medication one of the jurors talked about. And they said that one of the complications of it could be brain swelling. Like you have all
Mm.
those, and it's like, had nothing to do with the case. No doctor in our case, no defense doctor said anything about that. But one juror takes that, knew what a side effect was, and thought that that could be one of the reasons our client was hurt. And I was like, so now
Wow.
we blocked out all irrelevant medications in every medical record that we ever enter in any case, and no judge gives us beef because we tell them that story. We're like, Judge, we
Yeah.
need it out. None of their doctors have said any that this medicine is relevant at all. And so, but
Mhm.
that happened, and it's like you
Yeah.
learn. You
Yeah.
really learn from things, and you always know that they trust their own eyes and ears. And the jurors saying, "We looked at that tail light and it was lit up red, and it couldn't have been lit up red." So no matter what Brennan was going to show them and tell them that they saw, they're going to trust their own eyes. And
Yeah.
I've had jurors say, we want to see the spine MRI. We don't trust all the board certified radiologists. We want to
Mhm.
see if we can see a herniation there or impingement or whatever. And that's what they
Mhm.
do. And that's just how jurors are. Did you find it interesting in how they talked about the lawyers? It's kind of overly complimentary of the lawyers, but also some shots at Hank Brennan and the like, look over here comment and being a little aggressive with some of the witnesses.
To me, I think it's pretty normal that jurors are real hesitant to be real judgmental of the participants. I think there's a natural respect that they have for the roles that people play, and so they don't necessarily want to second guess too much or like try to put themselves in the shoes of the people who are running the trial. And I don't necessarily want to judge anybody's lane too much. That said, hard not to dislike Hank Brennan is I mean, just very hard to get a warm and fun and fuzzy feeling from that man's style. So it is I never expect like, oh, a jury's going to have a strong reaction, be like, oh, I hate that guy or anything like that. They're just not. They tend to have more decorum than that. But you do get that little bit of seepage of the little bit that they really do think is going to come out.
They definitely, you could tell they probably cringed a couple times when he said certain things to certain witnesses. The other thing I always try to tell the chat and the people at large is that they might hate Judge Canoni and, think she's so biased and unfair. Very, very, I have never heard a jury come out and say, oh, the judge was horrible. They
What
were a
was wrong
jerk.
with the judge? Yeah.
Yes, really. I've never seen it personally
Yeah.
in any of my trials or any of the trials we've covered. I haven't seen them come out with that. So you wouldn't expect them to say anything negative about Judge Canoni, I assume.
No, definitely not. I mean, my experience is like yours. They look up to the judge. The judge is typically their favorite person in the courtroom. They recognize that that's the boss. That's the person who's in charge. That's like the highest status person, if you will. And that's the risk you have when you're the attorney in front of that judge, that the judge doesn't like you or the judge doesn't like your side. The judge is going to sustain the objections to your questions and so forth. You might think it's so obvious that I'm being treated unfairly, but there is a massive risk that the jury looks at it and just assumes, well, if the judge is making these rulings, it's because you're the one that's doing something wrong. So that's just a whole added element of challenge to the trial process that I have no doubt the defense team had to deal with here on so many levels. You have so many strategies that you're dealing with. Your first and foremost priority is you got to win this trial. Okay, get the verdict from the jury that you need and put it into it, win, and then your work is done. But sometimes that's not going to be an option, and sometimes you have to prepare the ground for appeal. You have to anticipate a bad result. You have to make the record that you can. But then you have to consider how making that record is going to weigh against the impression you're making with the jury, the impression you're making with the judge. It's very possible that sometimes you can have a strategy that would have won you the trial, but you were so concerned about preserving your appellate issues that maybe you got the jury second guessing whether you should win in the first place, and you can talk yourself right into having an appeal. So there's just so much that the attorneys have to balance in a situation like that. There is Alan Jackson did the interview yesterday on Howie Carr's show, and I really enjoyed that. But he did talk about recognizing that there's a performance aspect to the trial. There's a theatrical component to it. He could not be more correct about that. It's so easy for us to sit and evaluate like technical stuff and rules and things like that. But at the end of the day, the jury is that human element, and they're the ones that have the outcome that you really want in their control, and that's what you're trying to get. So kudos to them for figuring out the pathway.
We're getting close to Greece, and the wardrobe is coming together, and Quince has helped with that so much. I've been looking for kind of the matching top and bathing suit together, and I got some from some places that just didn't fit right. Looked at Quince, found the perfect one, ordered it. It's coming to Greece. But even more importantly than that, just my everyday wardrobe has changed because of Quince. I bought a pair of golf shorts there, and immediately after wearing them the first time, I went back on and ordered them in every single color. Do you ever do things like that? They just fit perfectly. They're short enough. They're not super baggy. They're really comfortable with kind of a stretchy waist, which I like when I'm playing golf, athletic events, things like that. Absolutely love Quince. And it is a staple now. Whenever I need something new, it is where I start. So thank you to Quince for sponsoring another episode. Stick to the staples that last with elevated essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/LYK for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/LYK to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/LYK. Yeah, it's like that was just a little peek into the mind of a trial lawyer. You went back and forth on one thing 7 different times. And that's what we do. It's like, well, do this is better for the appeal, protect the right. Well, do this, it'll look better in front of the jury. But that's overall why it's so important when a judge is biased toward one side or the other. The jury's not going to know that. So it could make the jury biased toward one side and against the other. That's why lawyers make such a big deal about it, not because they think I hate this judge, but what is the judge going to make the jury think? Most of the time, we don't even care if judges like us or not. Just don't make the jury hate us, right? That's really what we're thinking about in trial. We're used to battling with judges, disagreeing with judges, arguing with judges, but just don't make me look bad in front of the jury. That's really what it comes down to. And you could tell she was really trying not to make Hank Brennan look bad in front of the jury, because he would say, that was one of the things I was getting frustrated with kind of throughout the trial, is his windups and the things he would say before questions that we all know you can't say, you shouldn't say. And that's like asking a question you can't ask, is inadmissible. That's unethical. You can't do it.
It is.
Making those comments, it's the same thing. And he did it over and over again. Objection, sustained, strike. And the judge would not come out and say, Mr. Brennan, you need to stop doing that, and admonish him in front of the jury. So he was never scared of doing that. And from my perspective, there was kind of a lot of that in trial. And as you're looking at it from an appellate level, where do you think the line is? Like, where do you feel really good about an appellate argument with either what a prosecutor is doing and asking versus what the judge is doing and the calls the judge is making?
Well, boy, it gets very, very complicated with appellate issues, as you know. Just from a purely technical standpoint, my number one thing I'm going to look at is, well, what's the standard of review on my issue? If it's something that the judge has discretion on, you're going to have a much harder time arguing that no reasonable judge would have reached this same decision under the same kinds of circumstances. But if you have a structural error argument, like, I don't know, somebody has the right to choose a counsel of your choice, and you decide kind of arbitrarily, there's a conflict here that can't be waived. That's a great appellate issue, because you don't have to show any kind of outcome on the trial. It's very unique in that respect. Most errors, you have to show. It's not just hypothetical. It did actually have a consequence in terms of the outcome. But structural errors aren't like that. So they're great appeal issues. There was so much in this case. I think one of the big takeaways, if you're looking at things from an appellate perspective, is to just remember that the judge is kind of the last and hardest person to blame for any problem. The easiest person to blame is the defense attorney. Everybody's happy to blame the defense attorney. If you can find a reason why anything at all is the defense attorney's fault, that's probably going to give you a pathway on appeal. Next best would be the prosecutor, some kind of prosecutorial misconduct. The issue that I think was going on here in this particular courtroom is simply that Bev just had no control over it. She has no discipline over the courtroom. We talked a couple times about how it's like watching a bad dog owner. You're out and somebody's dog is off leash and the dog is running around and the dog is like, running up and jumping on people and sniffing people and taking their stuff from the beach. And the person's just yelling, Max, Max, come back, Max. But they're never actually going to go and get the dog and and put the dog on the leash and control the dog. They're just going to be like, Max, don't do that. And it doesn't work because that's how, dogs are very smart about testing our boundaries and figuring out if we actually have them or not. Like, is this a real thing or just something that exists in your mind? And Hank Brennan was very much the same way. I think he saw very quickly that, rules, there is some philosophy in trial. There is some folks have the approach that, you get to do anything the judge doesn't sustain an objection to. If the judge allows it, then it's okay.
Not as a prosecutor, I wouldn't. I mean, like that's a wild theory for a prosecutor. As a defense attorney, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. As a defense attorney, you run wild. But as a prosecutor, that's very unusual
it may be a little bit riskier as a prosecutor, because you do run the risk that you're gonna overstep in a way that would lead to an appeal, and that can happen, but it's rare, man. It's rare to engage in misconduct to the extent that it's going to result in a retrial. It's usually got to be a huge issue, something really bad, or it's got to be like really repeated and egregious. It just
Yep.
doesn't happen all that often. So I think they kind of think they can get away with it too. But she just was unwilling to enforce those lines that us, we practitioners know perfectly well. Of course, you can't do that. We know that Hank knows that, of course, you can't do that. And he's doing it anyway. Why? Because it doesn't matter. She's not stopping it.
And it's not like a leading question, right? Everybody
No.
leads. You pop back and forth. He is specifically saying things he knows are not questions and he knows are inadmissible. And that's the thing that was bothering me because I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he didn't know about the holes. Maybe he didn't know about the x-rays, right? Find it hard to believe. But like those, there's no
Be shy. What
Yes,
even is
creepy
that?
too.
What
Like,
is, what
yeah,
even is that?
I agree. Don't be shy. Look over here. Well, at Mr. Alessi's request, I guess I'll show you this transcript. It's like, no, dude, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, you can't
Yeah.
say stuff like that. I had a trial once where, in car accident trials, no matter what, no matter how much insurance somebody has in Florida, there's non-joinder statute, so you can't say anything about insurance. And there's this, older lady defendant that T-boned my client, causing serious injuries. And the first question the defense lawyer asked is, how are you feeling up there today about being in court today? How many
Mm,
kids do you have that you pay? I'm like, objection, objection, objection. Sustain. Like, you can't ask those questions to make the jury feel bad, especially
yeah.
when I'm not asking for $1 out of her pocket, right?
Yeah.
Not one
Yeah.
dollar out of her pocket.
Yeah.
It's inadmissible. They know, but they still ask. And then they make me look like the jerk to object, and the judge just, but it's like they know that you can't say those things. And that's what's so frustrating. It's like, I shouldn't have to worry about stuff like that as a lawyer. How much harder is it to try a case against an unethical lawyer? I would much rather try it against the best lawyer in town that I know is
Yeah.
going to play by the rules because I know what to
100%.
expect. And you can go and try that case. But that's what would have been really frustrating eventually trying this case with Hank Brennan. And it felt
Mhm.
like it got worse and worse as the case went on.
Mhm.
What was your chat's feeling on the lawyering in the case?
Um, Hank is not popular, Hank is, Hank is a sleazeball. Hank has got some real issues with integrity, with honesty. Very, difficult to rely on Hank's representations, which is kind of the irony in this whole situation. When we watched trial 1, we called it the gaslighting trial of the century because there was just a lot of focus on you can't believe your own eyes. We sat and watched, for example, that afternoon. It was like one of the worst afternoons in trial when Yuri Buchanan was watching the surveillance video at CF McCarthy's in the waterfall and counting the
Mhm.
drinks. And we actually like went ahead and sat and watched it with them and tried to pay attention to what we're seeing. And like you literally just said she, put a shot in her glass and took a sip, but we watched it with our eyes and saw that not happen. A lot
Mhm.
of that kind of thing in the trial. A broken tail light, here it is. Well, yeah, if you back it up to just that one frame, there's a spot, but otherwise the whole rest of the video, it's an entirely intact tail light. So there's a lot of that just kind of tendency in the background with how this case is being litigated in the first place. But
Mhm.
then you turn it up with Hank and some of the representations that he's made and his felicity in changing position, right, to the I don't
Oh,
care at all if ARCA testifies to now I'm going to move to exclude ARCA. Which I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world, being able to change a legal position. Like, you have the right to do that. It
changing a
may not be.
timeline is much worse.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but when it comes to things like now, getting into the shirt and the misrepresentation
Mhm.
about the shirt, like you said, we can give Hank Brennan maybe some grace that maybe he didn't know, but there's two other prosecuting attorneys sitting there
Yeah.
at the table, and I find it very hard to believe that nobody knew where the holes on the back of that shirt came from. So just not a lot of trust in my chat for the representations that the prosecution was making over the course of the case. It's unfortunate because we should be able to have faith in them, but we can't.
Yeah. From some of the juror interviews that I've seen, they said some of their favorite witnesses slash the best witnesses are the MSP crime lab people, which I just thought was hilarious because that's very common because they're pretty unbiased.
Yeah.
Um, Dr. Laposada, Dr. Wolf, the Commonwealth's Dr. Wolf, Isaac Wolf. And then another one said Arca and Lucky Lawfren, I think
Lucky. Yeah.
was another one that people were saying. Any of that surprise to you? Any of that basically what you expected them to like? Did you expect them to put anybody else in there?
I think the only thing that did surprise me a little bit is just that it's not that uncommon in trials for jurors to kind of disregard the experts, to not
Mhm.
necessarily pay a lot of attention to the experts, either because it's over our head and we don't really get it. So, we don't have the tools to be able to decide for ourselves what we think, or we just assume, these are hired guns. Every side's got a hired gun. I know you've got a hired gun. They're going to bring a hired gun. Those are just going to cancel each other out. And we're not necessarily going to pay attention to expert testimony. So I wasn't really sure how much weight they were going to give that information, and it was very much a relief in this particular case, to see that they did. I mean, this, from my perspective, this case always centered on the medical evidence. That
Yeah,
was the bottom line. That
always.
was the giveaway that John was never hit by a car was John himself. And frankly, you all you needed was an eye test to be able to figure that one out.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, this battle of the experts was not your normal battle of the experts.
Yeah.
Just even if you just compare Aperture with Arca, it wasn't
Hmm.
an even
Hmm.
fight. But when you talk about the state's medical examiner, when you talk about Isaac Wolf, the great witness who had nothing to say about a car accident or the injuries to his arms, and then you
Hmm.
see all the medical testimony from the defense side,
Hmm.
Russell, Laposada, et cetera, and Welcher, Rentschler. Um,
Yeah.
but it's just, to me, all of that is indicative of Alan Jackson in the interview with Howie Carr said Michael Morrissey do better. It,
Hmm.
it comes down to the fact that, like, why was this case prosecuted, and the
Hmm.
jury kind of sees it all the same way.
Hmm.
I believe, if I'm keeping track, more jurors have said she's factually innocent
Hmm.
than have said she's not guilty because of reasonable doubt. They talk about reasonable doubt, but at the end, it seems like so many of them landed on the fact that she's factually innocent, which is incredibly unusual in a
Hmm.
criminal trial like this.
Hmm. Yeah, agreed. I think that is very unusual because it's a little bit of a safety hatch for jurors, the reasonable doubt. Because they know that, especially in a case like this that's gotten so much attention, not everybody is going to agree. It's going to potentially be controversial, and so it's very easy to just be like, well, hey, it is what it is. The Commonwealth didn't prove their case, and I'm not necessarily taking a position on her. And
Right.
we play into this a lot of times as defense attorneys. Not so much an issue with Karen, but a lot of times when you go to trial, you got to be like, look, if you acquit my client, you're not saying my client's a hero. It's not a medal that you're pinning on them. They
Right.
might be an awful person with a rap sheet this long, but it doesn't mean they committed this particular crime. Even criminals occasionally don't commit crimes. And so, uh, you're kind of accustomed to playing that and talking the jury into seeing it that way. So to see them kind of voluntarily step beyond that to where, like, yeah, reasonable doubt was kind of the legal issue that they had to decide. But from a fact standpoint, not even believing that she did it, they don't have to come out and say that. They don't have to
Oh.
justify that. So I think it really speaks to the evidence and the weight of it that they feel so comfortable expressing that kind of viewpoint.
Smart money moves are all about getting more out of every dollar. With Rocket Money, you can easily find forgotten subscriptions and have them negotiate bills for you, putting money back in your pocket. And with all those savings, Rocket Money basically pays for itself. So thank you to Rocket Money for sponsoring this episode. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscription. They monitor your spending and help you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lawyer today. That's rocketmoney.com/lawyer. rocketmoney.com/lawyer. Especially in a situation where it's very clear the victim's family thinks she did it. Like, the
Yeah.
victim's family is there. They testified against her. She even said they don't like her. They thought she did it from the beginning. And to come out and say that, I mean, that is unusual, I will just say. And speaking of things that are unusual, speaking of rap sheets, Something else I was pretty surprised about is the day of the verdict, we've got Michael Proctor interviews airing, which I was like, so he's filming these during the trial. Like, what does he think this is going to do? Did you listen to any of them? Have you heard what he has to say?
I haven't watched them, and so I did see there's been a big PR push too, and not just Michael Proctor. Apparently, we got that statement that the McAlberts put out kind of collectively, but now
Now,
I've been seeing something where I think maybe Brian Albert is doing an interview. So
all of them are sitting there together, the Alberts and the McCabe's, like 5 or 6 of them sitting there answering questions. Like, literally, they said something like, you better think before you want to be a witness in a case. I'm like,
oh
first off,
man,
even if this was the worst experience ever, you guys are like cops and citizens, and now you're telling people to not come forward as a witness to a crime
yeah,
because people are accusing you of something. That's, you think, the solution? Like, it's
yeah.
wild to me, this PR
Yeah,
campaign.
this ain't Delphi, guys. Okay,
Yeah,
that's not this case. It is, and it's just a situation where it's such an obvious PR push. The timing and everything like that, the coordination. It's just it's not coincidental. So you do have to wonder. Did they see this coming? I mean, you did a lot of planning and preparation to be in a position for all of these interviews and stuff to
it's
to be
crazy.
coming out at this particular time.
I'm really shocked. And Proctor, and this is also kind of another thing that I was wondering, because so the cheers were pretty loud when they gave the verdict. A couple of the jurors intimated they knew there was public perception and pressure. Hank Brennan can't blame any of that on the defense. Hank Brennan brought it up with multiple witnesses that I was like, why are you doing this? You're telling the jury the pressure is to acquit Karen Reed. Like,
Hmm.
that's what you're telling this jury with the questions you're asking Lucky Lawfriend and Russell and all these people. You're making it
Hmm.
very clear that publicly there's not a lot of support for you. And Proctor said things like, they're just the loud minority, and we're the silent majority, and things like that. What are
Hmm.
your thoughts about how any of that could have affected this process, if at all, and how it's trying to be portrayed now with this PR campaign?
Well, I mean, Peter, it's all I can really say is that it to me it just speaks to the power of self-serving delusion. Like people will believe anything to support their preconceived notions of who they are and how the world is supposed to work and who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. Big common denominator in this case, I think, has been this attitude. It's like a virtue ethics kind of attitude that there are people in the world with white hats and people in the world with black hats. And if you're a white hat person, then whatever you do is good because you're a good person. And so if you went and sprinkled some some glass on the bumper of the car to just try to tie up the case a little bit tighter, if you went and busted off a couple little pieces of that tail light to sprinkle out on the lawn, it's a good thing because you're well motivated. You're the good guy.
You're getting the
Uh,
bad guy.
People that are outside of that framework or outside of your club, of course, are not going to see it that way. Normal people tend to judge people by their conduct. If I don't know you, we don't have a relationship, we don't have a history, and I'm just trying to gauge you. I'm going to be looking at what do you do, what are your choices, what kind of judgment do you have. Before I make that type of decision. So it's easy for the rest of the world, I think, to look at this and be like, of course, these were terrible judgment calls, and of course, this makes you look bad, and of course, this is going to raise questions. And all you ever had to do, if this was your theory of the case, is just run the investigation clean. And so, the fact that you couldn't even do that for the death of a law enforcement officer, a fellow law enforcement officer, is just naturally going to make people question, why didn't you do that? Why would you not, run this as a clean investigation? And some people are going to lead to the conclusion that it's because you didn't want one. A clean investigation would have been bad for you. It would have been bad for the outcome that you were seeking. So this just kind of ties back into what you were saying about Michael Morrissey and why did you prosecute it in the first place? Peter, I really think there's a level of just self-interested delusion here that it's We see it in criminal trial practice a lot. We just normally see it sitting at the defense table, a massive amount of denial. You can have all the you can I've had clients that I've sat down and watched them on video
Oh,
committing the crime. Well, they'll be telling me it's not me. It doesn't even look like me. I'm like it's like HD, dude. It's you. The jury is going to think it's you. And we're just seeing that same kind of mentality, the ultra denial and the self-interest above all at the other table. It's
yeah.
extraordinary to see.
My partner Pete Sardis's favorite story to tell is he had a client one time that got arrested with like massive amounts of drugs, in his pockets. And when Pete went to meet with him the first time, he's like, "All right, man, like got a problem. We'll talk a plea deal a little bit." The guy's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "They found the drugs, man. They were on you." He's like, "Those weren't my drugs." He's like, "They were in your pockets. They were in your pants." He's like,
Oh, let me
"Those
guess, it
weren't my
wasn't his
pants."
pants?
Yes. They're like, "They weren't my pants." He literally said that. Pete's
Yep,
like,
yep.
"That's what you want to go with.
Mhm.
That's the pants they took off of you. You want us to go with." But I mean, it
They
does
were his
happen.
cousin's pants. What's your cousin's
Exactly.
name? I don't know.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And it's like, oh my gosh,
You
what are you
haven't made
doing?
your bones in criminal defense until somebody has told you the drugs in their pants. It's not their
Yes,
pants.
exactly. And it's just like, okay, all right. But I also think like with the Proctor stuff and what they're trying to do now, PR wise, is it's funny because they're blaming Karen Reed for doing this and saying Karen Reed won this case by twisting it in the media.
Mhm.
And they come out, and one of the things Proctor says, what do you do? What did you do? Or what would you do better? What would you do different?" He's like, "I mean, I guess now that I know it's high profile, I would have checked a few cars just to say I did it." That's what he
Just to
said, number
say
one.
I did
Just
it
to say I
was
did it.
such a tell.
And he said, maybe I would have interviewed a few witnesses earlier, but I would have done basically the same thing, is what he said.
Yeah,
And it's like,
yeah.
I-
Yeah,
like
they're
that says it
doubling
all.
down, and they always will. I mean, that's the nature of denial. They're never going to admit they did anything wrong. They're never going to admit that they're the bad guy. That would undermine everything, Peter. They wear the white hat. And if they did something wrong, that's not possible unless, they're maybe not actually a white hat person. So it would undermine their entire worldview. They're never going to admit anything. It's never going to change.
The answer should have been, I wish we would have documented more. I wish we would have taken pictures when we got there so everybody would have seen the taillight we saw. I wish
Mhm,
the freaking cameras worked. Like, can we start making sure our cameras work in the Sally
mhm,
port?
mhm.
I wish everybody would have been wearing body worn cameras. We need to implement that. So everybody I talked to would have been on camera. So everybody knows what I said was that's what he should be saying is
Yeah.
like more documentation to confirm what I saw was true because what I saw was true. Not like, yeah, okay, we didn't do that much, but like we never do that much in these cases. And yes, of course, we joke about finding nudes on every female criminal defendant's phone. Like, that's just what me and the boys are doing. It's regrettable, but it doesn't affect the investigation. It's like,
Mhm.
it's not going to play how you think it's going to play,
No, it's
and
really
that's,
not. And that whole comment about how, doing it just to say that we did it, it really was the giveaway from my perspective, because you are saying your mind is already made up. You've just admitted to your tunnel vision. You're not doing it because it might actually change your perspective on anything at all. You just want to do it to check the box to be able to avoid an argument that you didn't. So he's saying that in all fundamental respects, the ways that this investigation went wrong, he wouldn't change any of them, and that just says everything we need to know about the culture and the situation over there in Massachusetts, particularly with the Massachusetts State Police. I'm still waiting to see if we're ever going to get a death report on Enrique Delgado Garcia, the
Mhm.
guy that was killed over in the academy, like just after finishing the academy. It looks like there is a rot
Maybe
in
just to
this
say they did it.
organization.
Maybe they'll do it just to say they did it. We'll see.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
but
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
and he also said stuff like, "Yeah, yeah, sure, I believe there's police corruption, just not here." It's like Sandra Birchmore, maybe? Do you wanna maybe say that there could be some police corruption in your
Yeah.
town and city and state? Like, we know that to be a fact, but just like you said, they won't admit it even if it hits them in the face. And my favorite part was like he proved his innocence because he's like, "I was on the stand for 2 days and Alan Jackson never even asked me if I planted that evidence." It's like, Why don't you let him be the lawyer, sir? Because it's like, you think that's going to help their case just for you to say no on the stand? And does that prove
I
anything?
know.
But of course, that's what he's going to. And it's like,
Yeah.
in order for a PR campaign to work, you have to have some truth behind it. You have to have some
Yeah.
logic. You have to have something that actually plays with people that are looking at it genuinely, trying to figure out what is real, what is the truth here, because people aren't as dumb as you may think they are, Mr.
Mhm.
Proctor. It's not like you do one interview and you're going to change everybody's mind. That's just not how it works.
Yeah. And this is how we know, good lawyers know that's where tunnel vision destroys you. It destroys you, it destroys your case, because if you can't see what the other side is thinking, if you can't even process how somebody who disagrees with you is going to be interpreting it, then you're not going to be able to speak to and persuade those people. And so there's no effort even being made to try to internalize any
Mhm.
of the criticism that they've gotten out of this. It's very clear none of that has landed with Michael Proctor. He's very dismissive of it. It doesn't matter. It would just be formality stuff we would do to make you peons happy. And again, I mean, it just speaks volumes about why the system and the institutions are the way that they are in Massachusetts.
Yeah. And both Proctor and the McCabe's and Alberts said something to the effect of, oh, yeah, if there was this big conspiracy with 30 to 50 people, which I agree with, that does make the conspiracy kind of unbelievable, not impossible, but
Mhm.
unbelievable. 30 to
Mhm.
50 people with judges and cops from different departments, et cetera, et cetera. But they're
Mhm.
both like, and nobody would ever crack and say anything, as if to
Mhm.
prove that means there's no conspiracy. I do
Mhm.
agree. It'd be very difficult to prove a conspiracy to a jury with the information we have right now. But as you know, as I know, dealing with conspiracy cases and RICO cases with multiple defendants, most of the time people don't crack until there's actual pressure, until
Mhm.
there's an investigation, the FBI breathing down your neck. Right
Mhm.
now, if you believe the conspiracy that's being thrown out there, it goes
Mhm.
up to the people that would arrest you, the people that would charge you, the people that would
Mhm.
throw you in jail. If they're all in on it, there's not a lot of pressure, which is where the FBI component still comes in and, looms large. But they say that as if that's proof of no conspiracy, but every conspiracy starts with people not cracking and not telling on each other, right? I mean, that's part of it.
Sure. Sure, and I think part of it too is just that this is one of those rhetorical ploys that the McAlbert McAlbert side has kind of engaged in for a long time, which is just caricaturizing the opposing position instead of steel manning it. What we
Mhm.
saw through this trial is that you don't actually need a hundred different people involved in a cover up. You need a couple people that are willing to do it and a couple people that are willing to not ask questions and just, know what their role is, know that it's be quiet, don't look too closely, don't ask questions, don't rock the boat, don't volunteer anything, just kind of let it all work out the way that it's supposed to do. Um,
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, definitely the most plausible thing to me is like, we think she did it. We're going to make sure we can convict her. Like that's
yeah,
pretty,
the
like
Mark
that's pretty
Furman
simple.
style. The Mark Furman style. Like maybe you had a case. We'll never know now because you went and dirtied up the crime scene, with
Yeah,
your trying to make sure it was locked down.
exactly.
But maybe you could have if you had just run a clean investigation. And that was apparently too much to ask.
Which is evidenced by the fact that, some of the worst witnesses from these jurors were cops. And number
Yeah.
one, Uri
Kelly
Buchanan,
Evers.
they really seemed to not like Uri Buchanan and thought it was very obvious how biased it was, which is kind of hilarious because, listen, Victor's right history. So, whether they called Higgins or Proctor or whatever, if they
Hmm.
thought Uri Buchanan was bad, imagine what they would have thought of Michael Proctor on the stand, right? This
Yeah.
specific jury with the information they had. But they won. So the
Hmm.
decisions they made worked. But Buchanan, Welcher, they were like,
Hmm.
that's it. That's what you got. If you
Yeah.
intend
Blue
to place
Man
your
Group.
arm somewhere, yeah, that's
The
tough.
guy who
And then,
commented that all it proves is that you can transfer paint onto your arm. I love that man. That man is my spirit animal.
yeah, I mean, and and this is not to call jurors stupid. I do not think jurors are stupid. I think they have different perspectives and are everyday people from all walks of life, just like the chat. You could have a genius in there. You could have somebody that's low IQ in there. Their votes count the same. So you've got to convince both of them as a lawyer of whatever your theory is.
Hmm.
But there are more detail oriented people. There are more big picture people. I have questions that elicit that information in jury
Hmm.
selection.
Hmm.
And you want detail oriented people on a jury like this because there are so
Hmm.
many details that just scream reasonable doubt. And somebody that took as many notes as this alternate juror, that I think that's the one you're talking about as your spirit animal. Like, that's the type of juror you want as a defendant. And he picked apart the Commonwealth's case. I mean, it was just so obvious. Dever was another one that they all thought was horrible. I cringed when she was on the stand and was thinking, like, why would the defense call her? Jackson put it together in closing so perfectly. Jurors picked up exactly what Jackson was putting down. So kudos to them for calling her. So it was basically Buchanan, Dever, and Welcher that they thought were just really bad witnesses. And when you look at the Commonwealth's case, you can't overcome that. Those are a couple of your main witnesses. Those are two of your main witnesses.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what you do when Peter, I pitched this to Ian. Okay, I'll pitch it to you too. I'll see what you think, because everybody's going to have a lot of their takeaways from this. But I re-envisioned this trial, Peter. I re-envisioned this trial as a graphic novel, and I want to see if you could follow this this thought process with me. It's a graphic novel, but the twist is that Hank Brennan is the FBI plant. Okay, he's actually secretly undercover for the FBI. He's gone in to try to get the information about the hoax and the information on Morrissey and the cover up and get it direct. Never actually intended to go all the way through with the trial, but somehow the exit ramp was never quite available. One of the options might have been, if I wanted to pretend like I'm prosecuting a trial really hard but tank it, I might try to find an expert who is so ridiculous that they would do something like this arm paint experiment, because I'm like, no judge in the world would let this go to a jury, right? She'll throw it out, and then I'll be like, I don't have an accident reconstructionist, maybe we can just dismiss it. But lo and behold, I have this judge who is letting me get away with far more than anybody thought would ever be able to get away with. Obviously, I'm not saying this is what happened, but I'm just saying, you can kind of look at things through this perspective, and it would make some kind of sense. Like, if you actually didn't really want to win, you might do something like this.
Yeah, you might give some guaranteed appellate issues. You might try to do some things that would create a mistrial.
You might, yeah, you might.
You might just not call certain witnesses. I think
it very interesting that after the whole battle over the dog bite evidence, we had Dr. Russell being challenged, we had Dr. LaPosada being challenged, we had the counter challenge with Dr. Crosby and Garrett Wing and all of that, and then we never even got Dr. Crosby to testify. Like, he turned it into this weird, if LaPosada doesn't say dog bites, then I won't call Dr. Crosby, but Dr. Crosby would still be rebuttal to Dr. Russell, wouldn't he? So why was that decision made? I'm still intrigued by this. It completely ceded the ground of the dog bite.
People were like, oh, he didn't do it because of this or that, or there's this reason he didn't want to bring this up. I'm like, no, dude, you're never going to convince me it was a good idea to not I don't know what Crosby said, I guess, fully. So if he was like really horrible, fine. But you're never going to convince me that you having the last word, to have somebody come up and definitively say that was not a dog bite, was a good move by the Commonwealth. There's just no way.
Yeah,
and guess what? The same thing about the holes. Like, we already know about the holes. So to call Maureen Hartnett again, how much more was it going to really crush your credibility? The dog DNA expert, how much were they really going to be able to do to say that there was no dog DNA? It makes no sense that you, and one of the jurors said, the last 3 weeks really, clinched it for me. Well, what were the last 3 weeks? Commonwealth experts and defense case in chief. That was the last 3 weeks. So that's where you really got cooked if you're Hank Brennan. Two things pop in my head with your graphic novel example. Number one, we'll never know. We would never find out about it. And number two, the federal government would owe the Massachusetts citizens a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, they would. It'd be a great graphic novel, wouldn't it? It would be fascinating. We could totally pull this off.
and it ends with like Hank Brennan going into the U.S. Attorney's office there and, shaking his hand and saying, well done, my good and faithful servant. Well done. You did your job, sir. And especially when he couldn't ask for it, because he could have asked for it, and he did multiple things throughout that trial that I would have never thought a prosecutor would ask for or would do. So to me, kudos to him and Judge Cannoni for saying, just like everyone else, Mr. Brennan, just like everyone else, she's going to get that. And it's like, yes, she will. What do you expect?
I'm not going to cut Mr. Brennan any slack on that, because my interpretation of that is that, yes, you could ask for more jail time, but if you do, now the cameras are going to be on you and you're going to be speaking words, and now you're going to be getting attention in your great moment of humiliation. Yeah. And so It's perhaps a little bit self-serving on his part.
And that's what a lot of people were saying with the rebuttal too, is it was kind of, he didn't want to step in it any more than he did, which I get, but you've already come this far. Like you can't wave the white flag at that point, which is what it felt like he was doing. Not
Mhm,
calling a rebuttal case, was just so scared.
mhm,
After seeing the two trials, obviously Hank Brennan's a better lawyer considerably than Adam Lally
mhm.
in my estimation. But
Technically, yes, he's a better technical lawyer.
correct, and more engaging.
Mhm,
Uh, But I actually think putting all those witnesses up there saying he didn't come in the house and we had nothing to do with it is
mhm,
harder to overcome for a jury. Like, are all those people lying versus basically it's just Buchanan? If you don't like Buchanan, what's the story that and you don't like McCabe, I guess,
mhm,
what's the story they really have? And Carrie
mhm,
Roberts, I mean, tanked this time versus the last trial. She was a great witness. So
mhm,
I think I would have put all the McCabes, all the Alberts up there, the kids that were there, let every single person say, yes, this happened. We never saw him in the house. My dad didn't do that. My uncle would never do that. Put them up there. Let them say, you know, this person, you butt dialed, you know, that person, you went to school with this person. Let them do all of that. Because at the
mhm,
end of the day, then the jury, then maybe it does look like a 30 to 50 person conspiracy versus Michael Proctor's a cancer and he screwed this case up, which was about as
mhm,
simple as it was this time.
mhm.
What
No,
did you
I think
think
that's
comparing the two?
yeah, I think that's very true, and I think there were some major advantages that Lally got from how he conducted the trial the first time around that I don't think we would have known at the time. We needed this kind of counterfactual trial to be able to get perspective on that. But I think there's a couple of reasons why it was so successful for him to do that. One, he decided what the defense was. He set the stage, the terms of the defense by doing we called it the pre-buttal case. He
Yep.
just called all those witnesses ahead of time that he's anticipating or who the defense is going to be pointing their finger at and accusing them and saying, you know, this person did this sus thing and whatever. So he really he pushed the issue and he forced the defense to engage with it really on his terms, and I think that did work to his advantage because like you were kind of pointing out, you end up in this situation as the defense where you're implicitly kind of taking on a burden of proof. If you're going to say straight up there was a conspiracy and not just, well, we don't really know what happened because the police didn't investigate and there could be a conspiracy because they didn't rule it out. Those are very different positions from a persuasion standpoint and from a reasonable doubt kind of standpoint. So Lally's choice to do that really did corner the defense into much more of taking on that affirmative. There's been a conspiracy type of position. They didn't maybe necessarily intend or want to be so firm on that. I think strategically that worked extremely well. And then the other piece of it too that we got to talk about because of the decisions not to call witnesses this time and the effect that that has, you get to imagine, you get to project. If the person is just a faceless, you know, somebody, Proctor is just this monster under the bed. You know, you can imagine him to be anything at all. But when the witnesses show up in the courtroom and then it turns out they're living, breathing people and they have personalities and
Mhm.
it's you humanize them and then you start to think, well, is this something I could really see this person doing? They seem so nice. Makes it a lot harder to sell something like that. So I think that's a huge advantage the defense got this time is because the prosecution didn't put them on. The jury didn't get that information with their own eyes. They didn't get the chance to assess and judge these people. Then it's just imaginary. And when it's imaginary, you have a lot of doubt about it.
Yeah, I think that that's how I felt about Higgins and not
Mhm,
calling Higgins because they were actually pointing the finger at him. And I think there are some jurors that would be like, yeah, maybe he seems like kind of a jerk and the military base and all that stuff, but it's just a different vibe. I don't see there's any juror that would feel bad for Proctor personally. I think
mhm,
Proctor was pretty much like unlosable by the defense, but
mhm,
um the FBI investigation, I kind of want to talk about that just for a second because Alan Jackson had some stuff to say in that interview at the end. He felt like they punted it and they were
mhm,
doing things they had never done before, telling a target that investigation
mhm,
was over, and Hank Brennan loved it. Definitely doesn't feel like the defense was colluding with the FBI
mhm,
based on his comments. What do you
mhm.
think? Just like if you're looking at this, do you think there's any chance now that she's not guilty? The public pressure is coming because also it's kind of two-part question, right? Because then we talk about the jury instruction, stuff like that. I'll get to that later. But do you think the public pressure or anything that happened now can affect how the FBI is going to look at this and potentially opening it up again?
Well, that's a difficult question. In and of itself, public pressure. I would like to think that that's not going to influence law enforcement decisions. It really shouldn't, right? Like we don't want our police to just be responding to popular opinion. There's been a legal development, though, that I think it is potentially a little bit more significant in terms of whether there's going to be action following it. My view on the FBI investigation, Peter, I would say I'm pretty much like right in lockstep with Alan Jackson. In that interview, what he said, he basically said what I've been saying, which is that I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of this report because this is unusual. This is very out of the norm. As you know, we barely ever get information that an FBI investigation is occurring in the first place, let alone then getting this public announcement that it's over, but it's not direct. It's through this third party, and the third party is, potentially the target, or at least the suspected target has always been the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, kind of one of the prime suspects for being the target of this investigation. So just the way in which this all went down is quite strange, unpredictable. And I've had the perspective that I think that if you have some doubt about the truth of that report, the report that the investigation is over, I think that is justified. This is just this is not normal. None of this is normal. So it would not surprise me if, for example, in fact, the investigation maybe has not concluded. As you know, law enforcement, they're not under any obligation to be truthful about things like that. They can lie, they can misdirect, and that's perfectly legal in the United States. Also possible that the investigation part is done, but there's always concerns about abstention that's been lurking in this case from the beginning, since the FBI got involved. This idea that the federal government and the state government, they are separate sovereigns. They have equal interests, different interests, but equal interests in criminal prosecutions. So they don't interfere with each other. The federal government doesn't do things that would interfere with the state criminal prosecution. So there's kind of a need to be hands off until the case is resolved. The case is now resolved. So if that's been an impediment to any kind of action being taken, we should know that shortly. But I think, unfortunately, it's just a situation where if it is true that the FBI investigation is over, my personal suspicion would be it's less because they found, they didn't find wrongdoing. It's just very difficult to meet the elements, the formal elements of corruption in a federal system. And the difficulty here is that it's always been seen, like my understanding of it has always been that the real problem here is this old boys club, like this culture that is it's so dirty and it's so embedded into the process. Everybody kind of knows the role. Apparently you come out of the Massachusetts State Police, the academy, like already knowing kind of what the routine is.
If not, you meet with the commissioner and they explain it.
Yeah. The commissioner will let you know what your job is. And, everybody just kind of falls in line. So that's difficult to establish, like what's a quid pro quo, an explicit quid pro quo that you could prosecute as some kind of formal corruption. So my suspicion has always been there's probably lots of skeletons in these closets. They just don't constitute federal crimes because you can't identify. Here's a specific benefit that was traded, that was horse traded for this favor, this bad decision, this look the other way, this not ask that question. The way that the system works to protect the people you like and go after the ones you don't.
Yeah, I think the FBI is going to do what they're going to do, obviously. But it wouldn't surprise me if they continue to look and this maybe connects to something else in the future, because just like Michael Proctor said, this is how I would have done it. This is how I would do every case. And, if nothing happens here, nothing's going to change. There's a lot of eyeballs on there now. Anything happens in the future, I think
Mhm.
this kind of goes into a file that they'll remember. That's kind of like my thought process on it is
Yeah.
this could easily be used in the future as something they circle back to. Look at P. Diddy, R. Kelly, whatever. Some of this stuff goes back 20, 30 years that the federal government is willing to use in certain charges. So I don't necessarily think it's over, but it might be over for right now. It might be punted. Like Alan
Mhm.
Jackson said, doesn't mean you can't get the ball back when you punt. So
Yeah.
I guess we'll kind of see how it goes with that. But
Well,
the
one of the
public
things
yeah, go ahead.
One of the things I'm curious about watching unfold too, because we barely saw it pop up in the Karen Reed trial, but it very much came up in Turtle Boy's case, the related issue, the whole coming out that Morrissey is using the burner email to
Oh yeah.
communicate ex
Oh yeah,
parte
yeah.
with the judges, and I mean that's a mess, right? That's a mess. That is getting a lot closer to something that is potentially illegal and potentially criminal happening behind the scenes. But they never went down that road with any kind of direct information about Judge Canoni. Is she involved in that? It just was mentioned and then kind of never heard from again. So I do wonder if there will ever be any kind of follow up on that.
While this case seems like a one off to us and a one of one, I do not think this is abnormal for how things are done there. Like I really think
No.
that it's we're going to be hearing stuff from this and from
Yeah.
other cases connected to all these people. So I definitely don't think it's over from that perspective. But one of the big things that happened at the end of the trial was the verdict slip form, the false alarm verdict, all that stuff. And there's a couple different ways we can change stuff like that, right? Case law can change it, appeals can change it,
Mhm.
rules committees can change it. And a lot of that stuff can come from public pressure and it being so obvious that there's a problem with the way you do things if everybody's confused about it. Do you think changes like that are going to come in Massachusetts and beyond? Like other states can watch this, other lawyers can watch this. So many lawyers from all over America have
Mhm.
reached out, like, we're watching this, we're learning from this. Do you think there are going to be changes made because of how it all went down in this case?
Potentially. I mean, you would like to think that knowledge and kind of perfecting your system is always incrementally accruing
Mhm.
new information, and so every case that you get is a little bit of feedback on that. This one, of course, just being so high profile, what I think it did is it gave us a real perspective on how Massachusetts compares with other jurisdictions. It was a great comparative. Type of situation, particularly when it came to this issue of the lesser included offenses. Massachusetts has this from my perspective, bizarre and strange rule that the jury can't render a partial verdict on lesser includeds. They have to take it indictment by indictment, and they can vote, guilty or not guilty on counts 1 and counts 3 and hang on count 2, but they can't vote guilty or not guilty on lesser included offenses within count 2 and then hang on some of those. Uh, this is just bizarre because it sets up a couple of different things. One, obviously the problems that we had with the first trial, where there's confusion about what has the jury actually agreed to and actually not agreed to. And I think most people, it's not an unreasonable proposition that if a jury has decided you didn't commit a lesser included offense, you shouldn't be able to be retried for it. But
Mhm.
Massachusetts doesn't give them any way to make that formal decision. Uh, that's kind of overlaid with this issue where they use a grand jury in Massachusetts. Very different from Washington. We don't use grand juries at all. A police officer signs an affidavit. Judge says, "Yep, that sounds like probable cause to me," and that's it. You get felonies just based on that level of oversight. But Massachusetts, they use the grand jury, and so think about this, Peter. If they had wanted a DUI initially, they certainly could have presented that to the grand jury, right? They could have asked for an indictment on that. But what would the effect of that be? It would be that the jury then has the power to separately give a verdict on
Mhm.
OUI because it's its own indictment, and then potentially acquit her on everything else. So it makes it harder for the jury to be able to do that, to not present the second indictment. It's easier for the prosecutor to get prosecutions and to re-prosecute and to get the most serious conviction and so forth If you don't actually take it to the grand jury, just let it come up in a lesser included offense. So the incentives that I think this has revealed as well is something that should be part. It should be part of the conversation. It should be part of the reckoning, because if the grand jury is supposed to be a check on the prosecutorial power, it's supposed to be the community's voice saying, "Hold up, we're okay with this, we're not okay with that, we don't support this accusation being made," then creating an incentive where it's better for the prosecutor to just not ask you for your input on it in the first place, and it doesn't hold them up from being able to pursue that charge at the end of the day anyway. To me, that's a big problem.
Yeah, that's why some jurisdictions don't even allow the lesser included to be included on the verdict form, which I get
Yeah.
the argument kind of on both sides of that.
Hmm.
But I just think a lot of it is a mess. A lot of it is going to be used by lawyers, as everything is from the beginning of time, on how can it benefit you, your strategy, how can you use it to make it easier to convict, or how can you win on a technicality and things like that. So it is what it is. And if we write a new rule, lawyers would find a new way to exploit that rule.
Of course.
I understand that kind of theoretically speaking. But it was interesting to see it all play out in this case. And from the juror interviews, it sounds like the false alarm verdict slip was the same as the final verdict slip, which is good. And I'm glad. I was hoping for that. And that just makes
Mhm.
everything easier if that is the case. But we have some finality in Karen Reed. Oh, another question everybody's been asking. Do you think they're going to appeal the OUI?
Oh, I don't know if they will. I certainly think they could. I think they could. I think it's on the table. It's really, from my perspective, a question of, do you want to just go ahead and be done and move on with your life now, or
That's
do
my
you want to
answer.
continue
I
to
would not.
continue to
I
throw
would not.
down?
I'd be like, I'm
Yeah.
good. A year of probation. Let me move on with my life. This OUI is not going to affect her life. Like
Hmm.
some people, having a DUI might. I don't think it's going to affect hers. But
I
yeah,
think
I would move on. But
yeah. Well, I think there's two pieces to it. One, does it potentially play into the civil case? Is that something that she would even really care about? We know that once there's a civil case, we're talking insurance companies, and
sure,
like
sure.
they're the ones who are going to decide what they care about and everything like that. So may not be a huge motivator for her. But I'm telling you, the principle of it, Karen is somebody who has been willing to take a very
I
long shot
agree.
issue all the way up to certiorari to the
I
United
agree.
States Supreme Court on principle. So she's got a lot of fight in her. It wouldn't surprise me at all if she did. I
Yeah.
think that the avenue is there. I think there's a lot of questions. Unanimity, like I mentioned. Do we know if jurors decided unanimously that she was driving drunk at 12:45 or at 5:07 in the morning? We don't know. These are separate acts. If this is a lesser included offense of the manslaughter, then it would seem to need to be incorporated into that same factual scenario, the one that the prosecution was alleging led to John O'Keefe's death. There's no argument that her driving at 5:07 led to John O'Keefe's death. So is this something that's completely separate that they kind of incorporated into the indictment somehow? I think they got viable issues to argue if they want to. It's just a question of motivation.
Yeah, I definitely think they would have a viable argument. I think they could win on an appeal for the OUI. I just, oof.
Yeah.
It's just from my perspective, and I don't think it's going to affect the civil case at all.
Yeah.
Obviously, it would have been major if they would have won on one of the serious charges and proved that she hit John O'Keefe with her car beyond a reasonable doubt. That would be raised judicata. But with or without a DUI, if I'm taking this civil case, it's easy to prove that, she was driving while drinking, while drunk at the time I'm alleging the car accident happened.
Mhm.
Usually we don't have even that good of evidence in
Mhm.
those types of cases. So I don't think it's going to make a bit of difference really in that case.
Mhm.
Also, punitive, sometimes insurance companies don't cover. So you don't want to go for punitives, or you have punitives to add for. There's all sorts of strategic decisions on the civil side that I really don't think this is going to have a big effect on it at all. I also, again, call me, maybe I'm not principled, but I would tell my insurance company if I was Karen Reed, settle it within the policy as long as I don't have to pay $1, get rid of that. I'm not admitting anything.
Yeah.
And sign releases and whatever and just be done. Like
Yeah.
I would be so sick of this at this point. I would want to move on so bad. That's what it feels like her dad. Like I can feel it from her
Mhm.
dad. He's like, I want her to move on with her life and be done with this. Like I realize it's gonna be a part of her life forever and probably what she's known for. But I want her, she's relatively young still. I want her to move on. That's what he's saying. And I get it. I feel that. But like you said, she has taking the punches to go and win the war. I mean, she is willing, and Alan Jackson, she has a spine of steel or something. Like,
Yeah.
she has definitely exhibited that throughout this process. So it wouldn't be surprising if
Yeah.
she wanted to fully
She
clear her
was
name
she
in
was
every single.
Marquez coming back to beat Pacquiao,
Yes.
if anybody
Yeah,
likes
yeah,
that
yeah.
one. I mean, she
Yeah.
had a hard first round, man, hard first round, and she came back and took it by decision.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, my grandfather trained boxers, and he traded Roberto Duran and
Oh,
Macho
no way.
Camacho, and they fought each other. And he was the trainer for Camacho, and I went to when I was a kid in like Atlantic City. And I
Oh, that's
remember thinking
awesome.
about like some of those fighters, man, can take a beating. Like these guys look dead, bloodied and buried, and it would just go on and on and on. And it's like that's honor, that's principle. She might have been bloodied and bruised at the end, but she won, and so maybe
Good.
she wants to take it the full mile and clear her name completely. And hey, that's her prerogative if she wants to. I'm just
Mhm.
talking practically. And if I was giving advice to a client, that's probably what I would say is like, we can, but it's going to be a battle. Nothing's easy in this world, especially with all the attention on this case. But somewhat
But I
finality. Go ahead.
I think you're right too, though, that the thing we can't forget about, Karen's old life. It's we said we described it as a smoking crater. Like there's nothing left of her old life. It's
Right.
is coming next and what's available. So we're just now in the very early part of Karen Reed actually being able to envision what is life going to look like now. What is my life going to be? It's suddenly a world of opportunity rather than a world of just defensiveness and surviving and getting through it. And so hopefully I want her to embrace that. I think that would be probably from a personal perspective. Yes, we advise people on their legal their legal options and stuff, but uh, I think good lawyers care about their clients as people and want to see the best for them too. And just from a personal well-being standpoint, like
Exactly.
this is the time. These are when the opportunities are going to be present. The world is your oyster right now, so focus on that, seize on that. You don't need to keep fighting this fight over something that's really small and petty and ultimately doesn't matter. It's time to transform.
Yeah, yeah. Like, who cares how much money the insurance company gives her? That would be my perspective to her. But whatever. It is what it is. And hopefully, we'll keep following and see what happens with her. Hopefully, it's something good. She spins this into something good. I hope so. What's next for you? What's the next case on the docket that you're looking at? Streaming trials, covering whatever's going on in the background. Is it one? Are there multiple? What are you following next?
Well, it's Coberger. It's going to be all Coberger all the time, pretty soon here. We did just have the motion to continue this week. Was argued. The defense is asking to kick the trial date down the road, but Judge Hippler has already kind of telegraphed, don't count on it. It's probably not going to happen. So that one is set for jury selection to start on July the 30th, and the evidence to start on August the 11th. It's going to be a long one. They're anticipating like a 3-month trial. That's inclusive of if they have to have a penalty phase, because this is a death penalty case. So I am fortunate to be in the relatively near neighborhood of Boise. I've got family that lives down there, so I'm definitely planning to be there for some
Mhm.
parts of it. Specifically, the jury selection. I definitely want to be there for that, since we know we won't get cameras in the courtroom for that one. Afterwards, it is going to be streamed, so I'm kind of like, not sure. Do I want to watch the stream and stream it? Do I want to sit in the courtroom and watch the trial? I haven't figured out the details yet, but it's going to be one of those things. I'm
You
I'm
can
gonna
probably pick
I'm
and
gonna be
choose, right? You can
watching
probably pick
Coberger
and
very
choose. Like,
closely.
you can go some days, you can stream some days or whatever. Maybe you go for openings or you go for a certain witness or something like
Yeah,
that. It would be cool for you to
yeah,
go at least a little bit and get a vibe of the jury and what they look like and what they're looking at and who's taking notes. And I always think
mhm,
that's kind of a cool perspective, but I also like the ability to be able to kind of talk about it as it happens with people and see what the chat's saying at the same time. So I think if you're in the area, you're going to go there. That's awesome. I think it's good to have kind of that combo of
mhm,
perspectives that'll really help you give everybody an idea. I know I'll be keeping track of what you're saying, and when you go in those perspectives, that'll be awesome. I'll be covering that too.
mhm.
Recap perspective, not the full streaming game. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be long. I think it's going to be really interesting what happens in that trial. I think there's going to be a lot of things that we don't know about that come out during that trial. That's going to be pretty intriguing. But that's great that you're covering that and that you're so close. So everybody give Andrea a follow on Twitter, on YouTube. Everybody's been asking about Coberger. We're like a month away from that. So that's going to be heating up here. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pretrial motions and hearings happening as well. Thank you so much for joining me again, Andrea. This is always fun hanging out with you, talking about the case, picking your brain about it, seeing how you see it. And hopefully we'll do it again in the future.
Let's do it.
All right. For that, that's all we got. Till next time, we're out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a pase you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.